I'm Brigham, designer of the Skyline Fastpack. Want to walk through how to adjust and fit the Fastpack to get the most out of it, to be as comfortable as possible. Fastpacking is a very dynamic activity, meaning our body changes a lot when we use it, and the pack itself and the load changes throughout the trip as well. And so it's kind of something that we have to be able to fine-tune on the go. It's not a piece of gear that we can just put on, adjust at one time, and expect that it's going to be comfortable for, an entire day of moving on the trail, followed by another day, followed by another day. So we designed this and built it to be very adjustable, to accommodate for all those changes throughout a fastpacking trip. Things even like, getting soaked with sweat, our clothing, everything will expand or contract, and that changes how the Fastpack is going to fit and how it's going to ride on our body. So that's why it's really important to have adjustability, and it's really important to communicate to our customers how to adjust that and what to look for. So here we got, this is a size small Fastpack. It's fully loaded with a true 2-night or 2-day backpacking loadout. So we've got all the gear that would be required to stay out in the backcountry for a couple days, including a little bit of food. Got Derek here, so we're going to have him put this on, and I'm going to kind of look and see how it looks on him, and he'll let us know how it feels, and if we need to adjust anything, then we'll go through how to adjust that. So I wanted to have him put this on before I pointed out the points of adjustment, because it's a lot easier to see it on somebody when the pack is full rather than hold up a flat, empty Fastpack. So on the front, you'll see that there's 3 connection points. The 2 that are the most important are going to be the sternum straps that are on the shoulder harness. So we have an upper strap and a lower strap. So those are obviously adjustable for tension, so we can loosen it or we can tighten it on both of them, but they're also adjustable for height. So as it comes from the factory, they'll be positioned in these positions, almost all the way to the top and then at the bottom. So if he were to feel like something wasn't right, like it felt like he didn't like where it was putting tension on his torso, then we would play with moving up the bottom strap, maybe start with 1 notch, move it up 1 notch or down 1 notch, and the same thing with the top strap. We would perhaps move that down 1 notch on each side, and then we would go through the process again of kind of snugging it up and seeing how that feels. Now what's important is you have to be able to breathe. Your chest expands. So there's a little bit of elastic in the webbing here that allows for that expansion. But if it feels like the strap placement itself is preventing a little bit of chest expansion, then we want to play with adjusting each strap up or down. And I'll go through how to adjust that in just a minute. And then you'll see we've got this, basically it's just a waist strap. This is not a load-bearing strap. It is not meant or intended to carry any weight that the pack contains, right? It is only for stability, meaning we're moving forward and our body is jumping and moving side to side and up and down. And so having this waist strap around our waist helps with that stability. So one thing of note with the waist strap is if someone's familiar with a backpacking pack, like say one of our packs that's designed with a really padded hip belt, that buckle is kind of supposed to be centered around the navel. The placement on this is different. It is not intended to, it's not going to sit real low on the torso, and so it's not going to match up with where a typical backpacker is used to having their hip belt. So that's one thing that's important to know. We're not, referencing how a backpack hip belt fits to get the correct fit with the waist strap. It's just there to be keeping the pack stable. So as such, it also doesn't have to be very tight, just kind of enough to get like 1 or 2 fingers underneath between the buckle and your body. And then personal preference can dictate from there. So if we look on the side right there, I'll kind of have Derek lift his elbow up in the air like that. You can see this is a third harness adjustment point right here. It's almost tightened all the way, so that's closing the distance of the bag and the harness to that right there. So if we wanted to, if let's say Derek was skinnier than he is and needed to take up more space, then we would tighten this strap and close this distance more. If Derek was thicker or bigger than his torso is, we would probably want to loosen this. It's just a typical tension lock piece of hardware. You pull up on it and the webbing will reverse through and loosen. And then you see it opens up that gap significantly. And you can do that really far, or you can get it quite close. So I'm kind of stopping right there because that felt like I was getting pretty tight. In a second, we'll have Derek kind of tell us how it feels and what he thinks needs to be adjusted. So point of adjustment right here, and then points of adjustment on the sternum or the upper torso, upper and lower webbing, and then a stability strap around the waist. So at this point, Derek, what does it feel like? Does it feel too tight or too loose in any area?
I think it feels pretty good in most places. The only place where there's maybe a little bit of need for adjustment is this bottom sternum strap. When I take a deep breath, that's right here in the middle of my chest, or I guess right below my chest, where it feels a little bit restricted. So you can kind of just take a few deep breaths and test that, but that's where I feel some tension and like I'm not able to expand my chest as much as I would like.
Okay. So this is a really great example of how you need to be aware of where the adjustments are. Because if you notice, he said it's perhaps a little tight and he doesn't have much room for expansion, right? And if you look at just this webbing, we'll see that it's almost fully extended. In fact, I don't know that we can get it anymore. We got about 1 centimeter more. So first we'll do that. Is that noticeable?
Yeah, that's noticeable.
Do you feel like you need more than that?
No, this is probably where I would want it.
Okay. So if you notice, I loosened it maybe 1 centimeter, and that made the difference between his feeling like it was comfortable enough to start running and hit the trail or not. That's a really good example of kind of the finite level of adjustment that we always need to be aware of with the Fastpack. Now, let's say that did not loosen it didn't loosen it enough to where he felt like he was able to get enough chest expansion. But we ran out of space here, right? So that's where it's important to remember that you've got the side adjustments. So if you'll turn and kind of lift up your elbow, what we would do next is loosen this about 1 centimeter to 3/4, 1 or 2 centimeters or 3/4 of an inch. And we would do that on both sides. And okay, so now that's adjusted. So that's going to allow the harness to kind of come around the torso a little bit more towards the front and allow for more space and expansion around the lower part of the chest. So let's say maybe Derek had really broad shoulders. So then this is going to be loosened out there. And that gives you more space between the shoulders, the shoulder harness at the top. Same thing, it's just really important to always keep in mind that there's 3 areas of adjustment. There's the sides, and then the upper and the lower sternum straps. And then playing with those, let's say that the pack was 5 pounds heavier. Right now it's probably 8 pounds. Let's say it was 13. That means there's kind of more weight pushing down on the pack, essentially. So what we would want to do is make sure that we're keeping that stable. So if you turn to the side again, that's where these adjustments come in. Is the heavier the pack, the more we want to be attentive to the pack not being able to separate itself from the body. We want it to fit to our back just like it's glued on. So if there's a little bit of play where, let's say I can move my hand an inch between my body and the Fastpack, then we would want to tighten this up, because we really want that to almost be in constant contact with our back. And that's how we would go about doing that. You could secondarily play with tightening down the waist a little bit. That will also kind of keep it in good contact, but the first way of addressing that is going to be with these side adjustment straps right there. A couple notes on how it should fit. So if you look at Derek, you'll see, so when we asked Derek, he said it felt about right. So you'll notice that, I loosened this, sorry, I'm going to cinch it back to about where it was for you. You'll notice the space between each shoulder strap. There's easily, pinky to thumb on the lower area, and then, pointer finger to pinky on the upper chest. That's a really good example of how the shoulder harness is designed to fit on a person. Now, there is a lot of leeway one way or the other in that, because there's people that are certainly smaller than Derek, and we want them to be able to work with this, and it will. So that's where you're just going to snug it up. But one thing we want to kind of caution against is bringing in the shoulder straps way too close. So like, I'm going to loosen this really far to allow me to tighten the shoulder straps in like excessively. So now you can see these are maxed out. You can't even get them any closer than that. I'm not saying that this won't work for somebody, but it's likely that this is too close together for most people. So that's just kind of a general rule of thumb. Personal preference and comfort are always going to take precedent. So I would just say and recommend that always do kind of a test run and play with this, and don't feel like once you start a trip that you don't want to stop and take a few minutes to readjust and then try another mile or two, and just constantly get used to where your preference is for how tight this is, how close together the shoulder harness is, and then how high or low each strap is. That'll be really important, and it'll play a huge part into the overall enjoyment and like the comfort on the trail mile after mile.
One thing to note, when it is cinched too far together in the front, I can feel it right now on top of just sitting on top of my collarbones.
Yeah.
And where it's sitting like that, where it's not designed to sit right there, it's going to eventually cause a lot of discomfort from experience on those collarbones.
Yep. It's a great point. Again, the shoulder harness, so I'm just going to loosen it back out a little bit. Snip that a little bit, and then we'll tighten that. And you can see how easily Derek was able to adjust that on his own. I wasn't doing it for him. And then it almost looks exactly how it was before. And you'll see that the shoulder straps, they kind of come around the shoulder and then more towards the middle, and then a little bit out towards kind of the center of his torso. And that's exactly how the straps are designed to fit. And that's another reason why when he said, when we tightened it in real close to each other, it started to put pressure on the collarbone. And that's because the shape of the strap is not intended to be that close to each other, because it now anatomically, it's just not working with the body. So that's just an important thing to keep in mind. And then again, we definitely recommend trial and error. Load it up with a realistic load, put it on first, maybe go for a walk for like a half a mile, and if anything needs to be adjusted, adjust it kind of according to the recommendations we just talked through, and then walk for another half mile. If you've got a mile into it and you feel like things feel pretty good, now go for a run. Now take it for a run for about a mile. And after a mile, we want to see like if everything still feels pretty good. If it doesn't, then address those local areas, whether it's the side, the upper chest, lower chest, and do one little adjustment at a time. And then just don't forget that there's vertical adjustment and then tension adjustment on the shoulder harness, and then don't forget the lower side connection points as well. And then don't forget to take advantage of the waist belt. Just one personal thing, oftentimes I don't even use the waist belt unless I'm doing more than an overnight load. So I've got, extra, maybe a pound or two of extra food, or I have a longer water carry. So maybe I'm packing 2 extra liters of water. Then I'll for sure use the waist belt. But oftentimes, especially if I'm just walking or hiking, I won't even use the waist belt. Let's do some like visual cues that are maybe helpful to give somebody an idea of if they're wearing it right. So I think this example with Derek is really good. It's expected, again, that you'll be a little bit closer together at the upper chest and farther apart, kind of right below the actual physical sternum. This waist strap is not going to be real low. It's going to be a bit higher than the navel maybe, and if it's a taller person, it's absolutely okay if this waist strap is like right here. It's not load bearing, so that is not a consideration. If you turn to the side, Derek, okay, you'll see also that this isn't necessarily, this is probably a couple inches higher than like his belt line. And that's how a Fastpack, at least our Fastpack, is designed to fit. It's not as tall as a traditional backpacking pack. So it's not going to go from the belt line here all the way up to here. It's a short total height. And so it's not reliant necessarily on torso height for like proper fit. It's more chest measurement or chest circumference that's like the key indicator for what size Fastpack you're going to use. But you'll see this is actually the top seam of the pack that's in line with the top of the back panel. And it's just a little bit lower than the top of Derek's shoulders. And that's appropriate. Let's say this was even a little bit lower, that's just fine. If it were perhaps higher than the top level of Derek's shoulders, that might be an indicator that going down to a smaller size would be better. But you can see we've got really good back contact almost all the way up to the top of the shoulder blade. Having this space here is totally fine, especially the heavier the load gets, that space is going to be there and it's just fine. That's not a bad indicator necessarily. I think aside from that, when you put it on, I think most people will be able to kind of have that proprioception where they have an idea of something not feeling right, or they're feeling pressure or tension somewhere. Listen to those feelings and adjust accordingly. Other than that, I do think, I think we got this adjusted really well. A note on the flasks, we don't have them full of water right now, but when they are full of water, let's say it's sitting right there, definitely take the time to take this loop and put it over the mouthpiece and over the cap, and that will lock in the flask. They're 500, a half liter of water on each side, so we don't want that bouncing around, and those loops are a key piece of doing that. So basically, to wrap it up, we have a good idea of how it should look on the body from the front and the side. We're remembering that we've got tension adjustment on the upper and lower sternum straps, but we also have vertical height adjustment for the placement. We've got a waist belt that does not need to be very tight, just barely snug up against the torso. And then on the sides, we have the tension that opens or closes the gap from the bag to the lower point of the shoulder harness. So remembering all those adjustment points, how to adjust them, and when to adjust them will really help you guys get the best use out of it and be comfortable out on the trail.